afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Society of International Law, one of the organizations involved in convening this very important dialogue over the last 2 days. And this is our capstone event after 2 very rich days of discussion focused on the role of women in international criminal law. It's a great pleasure of mine to introduce to you the prosecutors who are represented here today, and to read to you the declaration, the joint declaration that they have agreed in this 3rd Chautauqua dialogue. I'll begin by introducing them. On my far left is Alphonse Van, representing the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Next to him, Norman Farrell, representing the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Next to him, Joseph Kamara, the Deputy Prosecutor for the Special Court for Sierra Leone. Our convener here these last 2 days, and the first prosecutor for the Special Court for Sierra Leone. This is their joint statement. In the spirit of humanity and peace, the assembled international prosecutors and their representatives here at the Chautauqua Institution, recognizing the continuing need for justice and the rule of law as a cornerstone to international security, and cognizant of the legacy of all those who preceded us at Nuremberg and elsewhere. Taking note of the 60th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and its principles that maintain the rule of law on the battlefield. Honor the life of our colleague and friend, Henry T. King, Jr., a prosecutor of the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, who passed away in May of this year. Commend his drive and force in ensuring that the spirit of Nuremberg continues. Recognizing the role of women in the history and development of modern international criminal law. Honor their sacrifice, their leadership and drive over the past 50 years in forging an international system of justice. Commend the women who labor every day around the world in relative obscurity, upholding the spirit of Nuremberg and the rule of law. Taking note of the recognition in international criminal law of sexual and gender violence as an instrument of war, which can constitute war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Honor the life of Alison Desforges and recognize her life's work in seeking justice for the victims of the Rwanda genocide. Now do solemnly declare and call upon the international community to keep the spirit of the Nuremberg principles alive by ensuring that the laws of armed conflict remain a cornerstone of maintaining protections of combatants, civilians, and non-combatants alike. Paying particular attention to the plight of women and children found in places of unrest and conflict, to ensure that they are especially cared for and kept out of the conflict. Ensuring that girls and women in conflict areas do not fall victims to rape and other forms of sexual violence. Investigating, prosecuting, or handing over to an appropriate judicial body those who violate international criminal law to ensure accountability of all persons, including sitting heads of state. Supporting the various tribunals and courts in their work to maintain the rule of law at both the international and domestic level. Working with regional political bodies to ensure that the rule of law is maintained and that those who are found to be in violation of international law be handed over for a fair and open trial to the international tribunal or court that sinks their person. Signed in mutual witness, Norman Farrell, International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. David M. Crane, Special Court for Sierra Leone. Fatou Bensouda, International Criminal Court. William Kaming, who has departed our meeting already today, but was here earlier and joined in this statement, a prosecutor of the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. Joseph Kamara, Special Court for Sierra Leone, and Hassan B. Jalla of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, represented by Alphonse Van. And in absentia, in memoriam, Henry King, International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. Please wait patiently with me while I ask each of the prosecutors to sign an original copy of the statement, and then I'll invite any of them who may wish to make a statement regarding this declaration. Are there any statements by the prosecutors of the significance of this statement in your particular context?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm privileged, I have to say that, to be part of this great event, this dialogue. The theme of this conference, honoring women in international criminal law, from Nuremberg to the ICC, is very interesting. It means for me that today, more than ever, we are conscious of the great sufferings endured by women during conflict. And today, we have taken the responsibility to rehabilitate them in their dignity, to restore their proud of being women. It is very important. This declaration is a strong signal, a strong call we are sending to the international community. But as you know, the international community is very often blamed. And the blame they put on it is that when it makes declarations, nothing follows. The declarations are putting into drawers. We must know that we are part of that international community. We, prosecutors, it means that we, our part, our role to play, we have to do something. We have to push states, countries, leaders to implement what we have agreed upon today. We must preserve women against those who want to destroy them. I'm saying today, never again. Thank you.
On behalf of those of us who've worked at the Yugoslav Tribunal, those that have worked there in the past, those that continue to work there, and those that will remain there to the point in time when we reach the completion of our mandate, I just wanted to reiterate some of the comments that have been made throughout the conference, and also to say that the dialogues here at Chautauqua have been not only important, but in some ways inspiring. We tend to spend most of our days trying to get through our cases. We don't think of the impact on the victims, and we forget about the mistakes we've made in our investigation. But the dialogue here, which is focused on the past, and in this case the past role of women in Nuremberg, on the present, which relates to the important contributions of women to the academic debate and the practice of international criminal law, and hopefully to the future in the sense that we don't make the same mistakes that we've made before. It's been quite useful. There have been positive developments, there's no doubt about that. The recognition, as we've said in the Declaration, of sexual violence and gender crimes as instruments of warfare, the fact that certain crimes are now, or acts of sexual violence and acts of gender violence are recognized as criminal under international law. And though less than it should be, the increased role of women in all aspects of our work, hopefully these three developments, at least those three anyway, will lead to greater accountability and a reduction in impunity. The international community must continue to support the work of those persons who are trying to end impunity, but also to continue to support, as we should as prosecutors, the role of women in our work and the different perspectives that they bring different than ours. We also must work towards not only the increase in the role of women in international criminal law, but the reduction of crimes of sexual violence and gender violence. That's what I take from this conference, and that's what we hope to implement, or at least I hope to implement in some small way at the work of the tribunal before we close our mandate, and it's our hope that the Declaration states this as clearly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Today, on the banks of the Chautauqua Lake, the bricks of history continue to be cemented. The concrete long arm of the law and of justice continue to be reinforced. And today, we acknowledge the good work of former colleagues and friends of international justice. And more importantly, today, in this signed declaration, we particularly recognize the significant contribution of women in international criminal law. Women are as much victims of injustice as they are the driving force behind the vehicle of justice. I am particularly heartened today to note that the Special Court has partnered with other international tribunals to bring justice to women and children, and in securing the rights of women. The Special Court has been the first court to recognize the offense of forced marriage, to recognize that the offense of sexual slavery falls under the rubric of crimes against humanity, and also to recognize an attack on peacekeepers. We've done that and will continue to do that. The driving force for that are women that are not here today. contributions from friendly nations, not to relent on their efforts in helping us complete the job. Let them also know that that job is so important from the things that I've mentioned before, the good work we've done. Please help us see us finish the job, and I thank you very much.
What has become clear, I think, to all of us present here, is that between yesterday and today, we have seen that women, in times of conflict, in times of unrest, they bear the brunt. They are the victims. They are the vulnerable group, women and children. What has also become clear, I think, in these past 2 days, is that women have made a difference from Nuremberg up to now, and they will continue to make a difference. We continue to call on the international community, do something, let us do something for women in these times. But I think the international community starts with each and every one of us, whether we are prosecutors, whether we are in civil society, whether we are mothers at home, whether we are teachers in school. It starts with us. And if we all pull together, we will be able to do something collectively. The victims in these times of unrest call out to us. They cry out for help. And I think we should answer to that call. Not because we are prosecutors, not because we are investigators, but because we are women, because we are men also. We should be able to heed to that call and to be able to rise up to the challenge that faces us constantly, not just from Nuremberg, but even before Nuremberg to the current day. Women continue to suffer. We have to put a stop to this. I think we gather year in, year out, and we talk about this, and we make declarations. But in the end, it is the actions that we take that will help to solve these particular problems that we are faced with. It is not easy on societies. It breaks down societies. It is not easy on families. It is not easy on the victims. But they're vulnerable, and they call out, and we should always be ready. We should always be able to help in whatever way that we can. Nothing is small. Every small action can be helpful, can be useful. I think it took Lemkin, one person, for the Genocide Convention to be enacted. He was one person. If every one of us has that resolve and that will, collectively we come together. If this Lemkin, as one person could do it, I think together we can also do it. There is no room to say failure. We have to do what we have to do. Thank you.
As we enter the 21st century, and we enter the 21st century, a new 21st century on 11 September 2001, the world shifted slightly. The past President of the United States said that the rules had changed. I would, as we finish signing the Declaration, caution all of us and the world that the rule of law has not changed. The rule of law is the cornerstone by which we get through times of strife. The rules have not changed. The Geneva Conventions, where we recognize the 60th anniversary thereof, still remain valid, relevant, and important. I caution that there has been, as the century begins, a shifting away from the laws of armed conflict to some horrific results. The recent strife in Gaza, where both sides clearly ignored the laws of armed conflict, is a clarion call for those of us who hold the Geneva Conventions and all other international humanitarian law dear to our hearts to monitor and to hold fast to the principles that were laid down 60 years ago this year. Because of this shift away from the laws of armed conflict, we see the increase, if there can be such an increase, of violence against women and children, who are always at risk during armed conflict. We're also honoring the role of women in international criminal law from Nuremberg to the International Criminal Court. I would just like to highlight a vignette in honor of all of the women who have worked so hard. When we were drafting the opening statement against the Revolutionary United Front, I used as a policy, and Joseph Kamara was one of those part of that policy, I would give the first half of the opening statement, and then I would ask a barrister from Sierra Leone to give the second half of the statement. I outlined the general charges and the gravamen of the offenses, and then they would talk more specifically about the charges. And I can recall sitting around in our conference room the Saturday before we were going to give the opening statement against the infamous Revolutionary United Front. And Boytai Stevens, who one of the brave women in my office, was asked to give the second half of the opening statement. And we were sitting around with several of us, senior members of the Office of the Prosecutor, and we were rereading the opening statement to make sure that we had it right, and making sure we had the timing, etc. right. And I recall I finished my portion, and then Boytai Stevens began to give her portion of the opening statement, and she was reading through a particularly gruesome episode of which you had some hint at the massacre in Duma by Leslie Taylor this morning. And as she got about halfway through it, she just excuse me. She put her head down and just wept. And that just shows the dedication of women and men who work so hard every day to seek justice. I also honor my mentor and friend, Henry T. King, who pounded this table last year, who pounded the table 2 years ago and said, "The spirit of Nuremberg lives." It still does. And he's still here. He's here in all of us. He lives in all of us. And remember, he always told us he would point his finger, crooked from age and arthritis, and he would go, "Reach for the stars." Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us today and over the last 2 days. None of the achievements that we have been talking about in international criminal law, the progress in advancing rights of women, achieving justice for women, would be possible without the very hard and dedicated work of these prosecutors. So as we conclude today, please join me in thanking them for being with us, for this declaration, and for the work that they do in the cause of international justice. And that concludes our ceremony this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Good to see you again.
See you next year.
Wish you luck.
Yeah, the days are just packed, you know? There's things you can do outside of the institution. Like, there's really a lot going on. It really is exciting.
Well, we'll be, Danny, we can relax.
Single, looking to mingle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to have to, start focusing my efforts. I hope
Thank you.
Any culture goes No, it's fine. Yeah.
Do you think I ran out of time. I got to say, I should have.